Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Welcome to the temple. We begin our service as we sing together Ma Yafeh Hayom Shabbat Shalom. How beautiful is the day, it is Shabbat. Now to page 172 to sing together Ma Tovu. Page 195 for the Berlow. יוצר אור ובורא חושך, עושה שלום ובורא את הכל, המאיר לארץ ולדרים עליה ברחמים, ובטובו מחדש בכל יום תמיד מעשה וראשית. מה רבו מעשיך אדוני, כולם בחוכמה עשית, מלאה הארץ קנייניך. תתברך אדוני אלוהינו, על שבח מעשה ידיך, ועל מאורי אור שעשית יפארו חסלה. אור חדש על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו. ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות. And we read together, the world is sunlight, restoring the soul, rejoicing the heart, bringing light to the eyes. More welcome than gold, a Torah from heaven. I have no light to give the morning. My Torah, my special human gift is words. As I bring my words forth from silence, welcome them, you who redeems the sun from darkness. Baruch Ata Adonai, Yotzer HaMeorot. And we turn to page 200 for the calling of the Shema. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוך בך ובקומך. וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
His word which I command you.
And we turn now to page 204 to sing together Mi Chamocha. Page 205. אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. Source of all being, we turn to you as did our people in ancient days. They beheld you in the heavens, they felt you in their hearts, they sought you in their lives. Their quest is ours. Help us to see the wonder of being, give us the courage to search for truth. Teach us the path to a better life, so shall we, by our lives and our labors, bring nearer the world we envision, one of justice, freedom, and peace. Baruch ata Adonai, Magen Avraham, ve'ezrat Sarah. And we read together, you are the open door that beckons me in. Peeking around the door frame, I begin to enter into your glory. You move me forward, O Eternal, to step beyond self-made boundaries. Lift my foot over the threshold that I might abide with you. In the house of the Eternal, I found my questions waiting to be posed. They filled me with wonder. Sit with me, Eternal Teacher. Encourage my seeking. As I fill my hours with your mitzvot, so shall I be filled. Send me through your door, stretching up to honor your name, sharing out this wonder, enriching myself in the giving. Blessed are you, Adonai, who gives life to all. Baruch Ata Adonai, Mechaye Hakol. Proclaim your holiness. Your praise, O God, shall never depart from our lips. Blessed are you, Adonai, the holy God. Baruch Ata Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. Please be seated. page 216 for the blessing for shalom, for peace and wellness and wholeness. O God, may we never become complacent, faltering in our effort to build a world of peace. Let the nations know and understand that justice and right are better than dominion and conquest. May all come to see it is not by might nor by power, but by your Spirit that life prevails. Praised are you, Adonai, who blesses your people Israel with peace. Baruch atah Adonai, המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום.
Sim shalom, sim shalom, sim shalom, Torah uveracha, ki v'chesed u'rachamim aleinu, v'al kol yishimecha, barakenu olenu, kulanu k'kippa, v'kol hanecha. Sim shalom, sim shalom, sim shalom, Torah uveracha. Baruch atah Adonai, oseh hashalom.
We turn to page 253 for the Misha Berach, the prayer for healing and courage and strength in our lives, in the life of everyone that is dear to us. Turn now to page 244 for Seder Kriyat Torah Shabbat, the order of reading the Torah on Shabbat. Please rise. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. Our God is one, Adonai is great, holy is God's name. Meaning, and God called. It's the first Torah portion in the Book of Leviticus. The name of the Book of Leviticus in Hebrew is after the first name in the book, which is Vayikra, just like the name of the Torah portion, which means, and God called. And actually, it's a much better name than Leviticus, no offense to the English or Latin of the names of the Torah, because when you look at the Book of Leviticus, it tells a very different story than what we read in the first two books, and a very different story than what we're about to read after we'll finish reading Leviticus in the last two books of the Torah. The first two books were about events that were happening also very quickly, but also very dramatic events. It's the creation, and then the story of Noah and the flood, and then picking up Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and their stories, and the drama of Joseph and the people of Israel, children of Israel, going down to Egypt, and then in the last book, Exodus, it's the most dramatic story that we have in our entire history, maybe, the Exodus from Egypt, the big story that we mention every Shabbat on the Kiddush, and definitely during the pilgrimage holidays that are all about the story of the Exodus from Egypt. And so would Numbers and Deuteronomy in a way will be. Deuteronomy is retelling the entire story and preparing us for entering Israel. Numbers is anything that happened in the desert between the second year and the 40th year, also a lot of dramatic events. And Leviticus is actually kind of like taking a break from all those dramatic historic events and focusing on something very different. That is the relationship between us and the divine, as you can see it in the rituals that we invented, or that God told us to do the mitzvot that have to do with mainly animal sacrifices, but not only animal sacrifices, all kinds of sacrifices and all kinds of things that have to do with what we do in the house of God, in the sanctuary, in the desert. And it begins with a calling. Vayikra, God calls Moses. And just before we say the blessing over reading from the Torah, and before we actually read, just to remember the context. Last week, the Torah portion that ends the story of the Exodus from Egypt and ends the story of building of a sanctuary to Adonai in the desert, ends with a crisis. The sanctuary was built. Everything was done the way God told us to do. Everything was perfect. God actually comes down and dwells in the sanctuary, and God's glory fills the sanctuary, and no human being can enter. So all of a sudden, this whole premises, this whole idea of building a sanctuary to Adonai in the desert seems like a huge mistake. If you bring Adonai into our midst, Adonai will actually come into our midst, but there will be no room for us. No human being can enter. So it's a very dangerous thing, and it's a big crisis that ends the story of Exodus. And let's see what the first few verses of Leviticus say, and actually give us two very important messages on the way we relate to Adonai, and maybe on the partnership and relationship between us and Adonai. But first, let's say the blessing on page 250. Please, Jennifer, lead us.
ברוך
Adonai המבורך לעולם ועד.
ברוך אתה אדוני,
אלוהינו מלך העולם,
אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים, ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני, נותן התורה.
אמן. ויקרא אל משה, וידבר אדוני אליו מאוהל מועד לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת אליהם, אדם כי יקריב מכם קורבן לאדוני, מן הבהמה, מן הבקר ומן הצאן תקריבו את קורבנכם. אם עולה קורבנו, מן הבקר זכר תמים יקריבנו, אל פתח אוהל מועד יקריב אותו, לרצונו לפני אדוני, ושמח ידו על ראש העולה ונרצה לו לכפר עליו, ושחט את בן הבקר לפני אדוני, והקריבו בני אהרון הכהנים את הדם, וזרקו את הדם על המזבח סביב אשר פתח אוהל מועד. Adonai called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, When any of you presents an offering of cattle to Adonai, you shall choose your offering from the herd or from the flock. If your offering is a burnt offering from the herd, you shall make your offering a male without blemish. You shall bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting for acceptance in your behalf before Adonai. You shall lay a hand upon the head of the burnt offering, that it may be acceptable in your behalf, in expiation for you. The bull shall be slaughtered before Adonai, and Aaron's sons, the priests, shall offer the blood, dashing the blood against all sides of the altar, which is at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So I want to tell you that there's a huge difference between the Hebrew and the English here, something that almost cannot be translated. So it begins by Adonai calls on Moses, invites Moses into the tent of meeting, to the sanctuary. Rashi, the great interpreter, is saying that this was a call because of likeness. Adonai likes Moses, so Adonai invites Moses in. So the affection that Adonai has towards Moses kind of just makes the crisis of the end of Exodus go away. All of a sudden, if you like one another, you can overcome whatever barrier, whatever crisis there is between us. But it doesn't end there. It doesn't only say that between Adonai and us there should be a relationship that is a relationship of affection. The next thing, so what does Adonai have to say to Moses? Adonai says to Moses, speak to the Israelite and say to them, and here comes the thing of the Hebrew, Adam ki yakriv. So the English says, when any of you presents an offering of cattle to Adonai. Yakriv is to sacrifice, is to give something of yourself. But it comes from the same root as karov, to get near. So when you bring a sacrifice into the sanctuary, when you bring a sacrifice, something from yourself, something that you are literally giving away from yourself, from your cattle, in order to bring it to Adonai, you also become closer to Adonai. I think it's true also about human relationship. When you're willing to give something of yourself, it makes you closer to the other person you're in relations with. But here, the whole idea of sacrifices to Adonai come from the same root as getting close to Adonai. And from the first sacrifice that human beings have brought to Adonai, the first one was brought by Cain, and it was just spontaneous. Cain was not asked to do that. And here it seems that it's also spontaneous. We're going to have 6 long chapters in the beginning of Leviticus talking about times that you have to bring a sacrifice of guilt or sin offering or all kinds of things like that. But here, when a person wants to get closer to Adonai, that's the way to do it. And all of a sudden, the sanctuary, instead of symbolizing a crisis, the fact that the presence of Adonai in our midst actually blocks the relationship because we cannot be at the same room with Adonai. God's presence fills the sanctuary and there's no room for humanity. All of a sudden, it's a chance to actually get closer to Adonai. What do we do with that when it comes to human relationship, when our personalities become so big that they fill the room so much that there is no room to the other? How do we make room for them to come close to us and for us to come close to them? That's another matter. The Book of Leviticus is going to speak about it later. But here, it's about how to get closer to Adonai. And all of a sudden, the book of Leviticus becomes focused not on animal sacrifices and burnt offerings and all that things, all those issues that make us feel uncomfortable, but it focuses how to create a relationship, first between us and the divine, and then between us and each other. Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and we go now to the blessing after reading from the Torah.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam atah b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen. V'yisot haTorah asher tzal Moshe
Page 283 for the Aleinu. Please rise. Please join me as we say together, "Let us adore the ever-living God and render praise unto you, who spreads out the heavens and established the earth, whose glory is revealed in the heavens above, and whose greatness is manifest throughout the world. You are our God, there is none else."
Baruch
We conclude the Aleinu on page 287 as we read together. May we gain wisdom in our lives, overflowing like a river with understanding. Loved each of us for the peace we bring to others. May our deeds exceed our speech, and may we never lift up our hand, but to conquer fear and doubt and despair. Rise up like the sun, O God, over all humanity. Cause light to go forth over all the lands between the seas, and light up the universe with the joy of wholeness, of freedom, and of peace. Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people, whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. On this Shabbat, we remember especially Joshua Fink, Raymond Allen Sr., Doris Heller, Joan Carter, Dan Bick, Paula Ungeleiter, Ruth Kronisch, Dolly Berg, Estelle Berkowitz, Alice Cahill, Brooke Miller, Maurice Feinberg, Dorothy Joseph, Bash Rapport-Cohen, Rebecca Schneider, Sam Hellman, Gertrude F. Brownstein, Sylvia Becker, David Schneider, Philip Flarsheim, Melissa Spielberg Marshall, Irma Jean Yoffe, Charles Penso, Maurice Katz, Jerome Eldorf, Yaakov Yusim, N. William Weinstein, Lina Feynman, Gabe Belker, Samuel Young, Herman Pure, Marianne Ruth Morgulin, Martha Gilbert, Fedor Fred Benjamin, Hattie Grossman, Carl N. Victor, Toby S. Levy, James Levy, Evelyn Van Dam, Mildred Schneider, Rosemary Markovitz. And in recent days, Shelton R. Weber, Bonnie Bloom. We think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have drawn into our hearts with our own. With the blessed memories of our loved ones in our hearts, we rise as we turn to page 294 for the Mourner's Kaddish. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון, ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהא שמי רבה מברך לעלם ולעולמי עולמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלל שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהא שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. זיכרונם לברכה, may the memory of our loved ones come to be a blessing and a benediction. Amen. Our closing song is Oseh Shalom. We ask God to bring peace and wholeness and wellness to all humanity.
Israel,
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. May it be a Shabbat of Shalom to our bodies, to our minds, to our souls. Shabbat Shalom.